Favorite quotes from the book The Kybalion, a study of the Hermetic philosophy of ancient Egypt and Greek by the Three Initiates. Introduction. Our intent is not to erect a new temple of knowledge, but rather to place in the hands of the student a master key, with which he may open the many inner doors in the temple of mystery through the main portals he has already entered. The student of comparative religions will be able to perceive the influence of the Hermetic teachings in every religion worthy of the name. Whether it be a dead religion or one in full vigor in our own times, there is always certain correspondence, in spite of the contradictory features, and the Hermetic teachings act as the great reconciler. There have always been a few initiates in each generation, in the various lands of the earth, who kept alive the sacred flame of the Hermetic teachings, and such have always been willing to use their lamps to relight the lesser lamps of the outside world. When the light of truth grew dim and clouded by reason of neglect, and when the wicks became clogged with foreign matter, there were always a few to tend faithfully to the altar of the truth, upon which was kept aright the perpetual lamp of wisdom. These men devoted their lives to the labor of love. These initiates have never sought popular approval, nor numbers, nor followers. They are indifferent to these things, for they know how few there are in each generation who are ready for the truth, or who would recognize it if it were presented to them. They reserve the strong meat for the men, while others furnish the milk for babes. They reserve their pearls of wisdom for the few elect, who recognize their value and who wear them in their crowns, instead of casting them before the materialistic vulgar swine, who would trample them in the mud and mix them with their disgusting mental food. The Kybalion as follows: where fall the footsteps of the Master, the ears of those ready for their teaching open wide. And again, when the ears of the student are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom. But their customary attitude had always been strictly in accordance with the other Hermetic aphorism, also in the Kybalion: the lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding. If you are a true student, you will be able to work out and apply these principles. If not, then you must develop yourself into one, for otherwise the Hermetic teachings will be as words to you. Chapter 1. The Hermetic Philosophy. The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding. The people of ancient Greece also made him one of their many gods, calling him Hermes, the god of wisdom. The Egyptians revered his memory for many centuries, yes, tens of centuries, calling him the scribe of the gods, and bestowing upon him distinctively his ancient title, which means the thrice great, the great, the greatest great, etc. In all the ancient lands, the name of Hermes was revered, and the name being synonymous with the fount of wisdom. Even to this day, we use the term Hermetic in the sense of secret, sealed so that nothing can escape, etc. And by this reason of the fact that the followers of Hermes always observed the principle of secrecy in their teachings. Even to this day, we use the term Hermetic in the sense of secret, sealed so that nothing can escape, etc. And this by reason of the fact that the followers of Hermes always observed the principles of secrecy in their teachings. They did not believe in casting pearls before swine, but rather held to the teaching, milk for babes, meat for strong men, both of which maxims are familiar to readers of the Christian scriptures, but both of which have been used by the Egyptians for centuries before the Christian era. And this policy of careful dissemination of the truth has always characterized the Hermetics, even unto the present day. The ancient occultism of India and Persia degenerated and was largely lost, owing to the fact that the teachers became priests and so mixed theology and the philosophy, the result being that the occultism of India and Persia has been gradually lost amidst the mass of religious superstition, cults, creeds, and gods. So it was with ancient Greece and Rome. So it was with the Hermetic teachings of the Gnostics and early Christians, which were lost at the time of Constantine, whose iron hand smothered philosophy with the blanket of theology, losing to the Christian Church that which was its very essence, the spirit, and causing it to grope throughout several centuries before it found the way back to its ancient faith. It was merely a collection of maxims, axioms, and precepts, which were non-understandable to outsiders, but which were readily understood by students after the axioms, maxims, and precepts had been explained and exemplified by the Hermetic initiates. These teachings really constituted the basic principles of the art of Hermetic alchemy, which, contrary to the general belief, dealt in the mastery of mental forces rather than material elements, the transmutation of one kind of mental vibration into others, instead of the changing of one kind of metal into another. The legends of the Philosopher's Stone, which would turn base metal into gold, was an allegory relating to the Hermetic philosophy, readily understood by all students of true Hermeticism. We herein give you many of the maxims, axioms, and precepts of the Kybalion, accompanied by explanations and illustrations which we deem likely to render the teachings more easily comprehended by the modern student, particularly as the original text is purposely veiled in obscure terms. Where fall the footsteps of the Master, the ears of those ready for his teachings open wide. When the ears of the student are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom. So that according to the teachings, the passage of this book to those ready for the instruction will attract the attention of such as are prepared to receive the teaching. And likewise, when the pupil is ready to receive the truth, then will this little book come to him or her. Such is the law. The Hermetic principle of cause and effect is its aspect of the law of attraction. Will bring lips and ear together, pupil and book in company. So mote it be. Chapter 2. The 7 Hermetic Principles. The principles of truth are 7. He who knows these, understandably, possesses the magic key, before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. Number 1. The principle of mentalism. All is mind. The universe is mental. This principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances, which we know under the terms of the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter and energy, and in short, all that is apparent to our material senses, is spirit, which in itself is unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as an universal, infinite, living mind. It also explains that all the phenomenal world of universe is simply a mental creation of the all, subject to the laws of created things, and that the universe as a whole, and in its parts or units, has its existence in the mind of the all, in which mind we live and move and have our being. This principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all of the varied mental and psychic phenomena that occurs such a large portion of the public attention, and which, without such explanation, are non-understandable and defy scientific treatment. An understanding of this great Hermetic principle of mentalism establishes the individual to readily grasp the laws of the mental universe, and to apply the same to his well-being and advancement. With the master key in his possession, the student may unlock the many doors of the mental and psychic temple of knowledge, and enter the same freely and intelligently. And these words are as true today as at the time they were written. Without this master key, mastery is impossible, and the student knocks in vain at the many doors of the temple. Number 2. The principle of correspondence. As above, so below. as below, so above. There are planes beyond our knowing, but when we apply the principle of correspondence to them, we are able to understand much that would otherwise be unknowable to us. The principle of geometry enables man to measure distinct suns and their movement, while seated in his observatory. So a knowledge of the principle of correspondence enables man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. Studying the monad, he understands the archangel. Number 3, the principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. This principle explains that the differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying rates of vibration. The vibration of spirit is at such an infinite rate of intensity and rapidity that it is practically at rest, just as a rapid moving wheel seems to be motionless. From corpuscle and electron, atom and molecule to worlds and universes, everything is in vibratory motion. This is also true on the planes of energy and force, which are but varying degrees of vibration, and also on the mental planes, whose states depend upon vibrations, and even on the spiritual planes. Number 4, the principle of polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. Thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, differing only in degree. The pairs of opposites may be reconciled. Extremes meet. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half false. There are two sides to everything, etc., etc., etc. It explains that in everything there are two poles or opposite aspects, and that opposites are really only the two extremes of the same thing, with varying degrees between them. The same principle manifests in the case of light and darkness, which are the same thing, the difference consisting of varying degrees between the two poles of the phenomena. Good and evil are but the poles of the same thing, and the Hermeticist understands the art of transmuting evil into good by means of an application of the principle of polarity. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy known and practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of the principle will enable one to change his own polarity as well as that of the others, if he will devote the time and study necessary to master the art. Number 5, the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. This principle embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion to and fro, a flow and inflow, a swing backwards and forwards, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and a low tide, between the two poles which exist in accordance with the principle of polarity described a moment ago. There is always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. They apply to the mental law of neutralization. They cannot annul the principle or cause it to cease its operation, but they have learned how to escape its effects upon themselves, to a certain degree depending on the mastery of the principle. They have learned how to use it instead of being used by it. The master of Hermetics polarizes himself at the point at which he desires to rest, and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum, which would tend to carry him to the other pole. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery do this to a certain degree, more or less unconsciously, but the master does this consciously, and by the use of his will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses who are swung back and forth like a pendulum. Number 6. The principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to the law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. The Hermetics understand the art and methods of rising above the ordinary plane of cause and effect to a certain degree, and by mentally rising to a higher plane they become causers instead of effectors. The masters, rising to the plane above, dominate their moods, characteristics, qualities, and powers, as well as the environmental surrounding them, and become movers instead of pawns. They help to play the game of life instead of being played, and move about by other wills and environment. They use the principle instead of being its tool. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to rule on their own plane. In this statement there is condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge. Let him read who can. Principle number 7. The principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. An understanding of its laws will throw light on many subjects that has perplexed the mind of men. The principle of gender works ever in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. Everything and every person contains the two elements or principles. If you would understand the philosophy of mental and spiritual creation, generation and regeneration, you must understand and study this Hermetic principle. It contains the solution of many mysteries of life. Chapter 3. Mental Transmutation, the first principle. Mind, as well as metals and elements, may be transmuted from state to state, degree to degree, condition to condition, pole to pole, vibration to vibration. True Hermetic transmutation is a mental art. They possessed the inner knowledge as well as the outer knowledge, the latter alone being possessed by modern scientists. Among the many secret branches of knowledge possessed by the Hermeticists was that known as mental transmutation, which forms the subject matter of this lesson. The word transmute means to change from one nature, form, or substance into another, to transform. And accordingly, mental transmutation means the art of changing and transforming mental states, forms, and conditions into others. If the universe is mental in its nature, then mental transmutation must be the art of changing the conditions of the universe. If all be mental, then the art which enables us to transmute mental conditions must render the master the controller of material conditions, as well as those ordinarily called mental. As a matter of fact, none but advanced mental alchemists have been able to attain the degree of power necessary to control the grosser physical conditions. These masters do not make public exhibitions of their powers, but seek seclusion from the crowds of men in order to better work their way along the path of attainment. We mention their existence at this point merely to call your attention to the fact that their power is entirely mental and operates along the lines of the higher mental transmutation under the Hermetic principle of mentalism. The universe is mental. Our purpose at this point being merely to show the Hermetic principle and art underlying all of these various forms of practice, good and evil, for the force can be used in opposite directions according to the Hermetic philosophy of polarity. In this little book, we shall state the basic principles of mental transmutation, that all who read may grasp the underlying principles and thus possess the master key that will unlock the many doors of the principle of polarity. We shall now proceed to a consideration of the first of the Hermetic 7 principles, the principle of mentalism, in which is explained the truth that the all is mind, the universe is mental. In the words of the Kybalion, we ask the close attention and careful study of this great principle on the part of our students, for it is really the basic principle of the whole Hermetic philosophy and of the Hermetic art of mental transmutation. Chapter 4. The All. Under and back of the universe of time, space, and change is ever to be found the substantial reality, the fundamental truth. Under and behind all outward appearances or manifestations, there must always be a substantial reality. This is the law. Man, considering the universe of which he is a unit, sees nothing but change in matter, forces, and mental states. He sees that nothing really is, but that everything is becoming and changing. Nothing stands still, everything is being born, growing, dying. The very instant a thing reaches its height, it begins to decline. The law of rhythm is in constant operation. There is no reality, enduring, quality, fixity, or substantiality in anything. Nothing is permanent but change. He sees all things evolving from other things and resolving into other things. Constant action and reaction, inflow and outflow, building up and tearing down, creating and destruction, birth, growth, and death. Nothing endures but change. And if he be a thinking man, he realizes that all these changing things must be put outward appearances or manifestations of some underlying power, some substantial reality. In these lessons, we have followed the example of some of the world's greatest thinkers, both ancient and modern, the Hermetic masters, and have called this underlying power, this substantial reality, by the Hermetic name of the All, which term we consider the most comprehensive of the many terms applied by man to that which transcends names and terms. The All is unknowable. This must be so, for naught by the All itself can comprehend its own nature and being. The Hermetics believe and teach that the All in itself is and must ever be unknowable. They regard all the theories, guesses, and speculations of the theologians and metaphysicians regarding the inner nature of the All as but the childish efforts of mortal minds to grasp the secret of the infinite. Such efforts have always failed and will always fail, from the very nature of the task. One pursuing such inquiries travels around and around in the labyrinth of thought, until he is lost to all sane reasoning, action, or conduct, and is utterly unfitted for the work of life. He is like the squirrel which frantically runs around and around the circling treadmill wheel of his cage, traveling ever and yet reaching nowhere, at the end a prisoner still, and standing just where he started. And still more presumptuous are those who attempt to ascribe to the All the personality, qualities, properties, characteristics, and attributes of themselves, ascribing to the All the human emotions, feelings, and characteristics, even down to the pettiest qualities of mankind, such as jealousy, susceptibility to flattery and praise, desire for offerings and worship, and all the other survivals from the days of childhood of the race. Such ideas are not worthy of grown men and women and are rapidly being discarded. We do not insist upon our students accepting these definitions. We mention them merely to show our position. That which is fundamental truth, the substantial reality, is beyond true naming, but the wise men call it the All. In its essence, the All is unknowable. But the report of reason must be hospitably received and treated with respect. The All must be all that really is. There can be nothing existing outside of the All, else the All would not be the All. The All must be infinite, for there is nothing else to define, confine, bound, limit, or restrict the All. It must be infinite in time or eternal. It must have always continuously existed, for there is nothing else to have ever created it, and something can never evolve from nothing. And if it had ever not been, even for a moment, it would not be now. It must continuously exist forever, for there is nothing to destroy it, and it can never not be, even for a moment. It must be infinite in power, or absolute, for there is nothing to limit, restrict, restrain, confine, disturb, or condition it. It is subject to no other power, for there is no other power. The all being infinite, absolute, eternal, unchangeable, it must follow that anything finite, changeable, fleeting, and conditioned cannot be the all. And as there is nothing outside of the all, in reality, then any and all such finite things must be as nothing in reality. Matter cannot manifest life or mind, and as life and mind are manifested in the universe, the all cannot be matter, for nothing rises higher than its own source. Nothing is ever manifested and in effect that is not in the cause. Modern science informs us that there is really no such thing as matter, that what we call matter is merely interpreted energy or force, that is, energy or force at a low rate of vibration. As a recent writer has said, matter has melted into mystery. Even material science has abandoned the theory of matter and now rests on the basis of energy. Then is the all mere energy or force? Not energy or force as the materialists use the term, for their energy and force are blind, mechanical things, devoid of life or mind. Life and mind can never evolve from blind energy or force. For the reason given a moment ago, nothing can rise higher than its source. Nothing is evolved unless it is involved. Nothing manifests in the effect unless it is in the cause. And so the all cannot be mere energy or force, for if it were, then there would be no such things as life and mind in existence. And we know better than that, for we are alive and using mind to consider this very question. And so are those who claim the energy or force is everything. Chapter 5. The Mental Universe. The universe is mental, held in the mind of the all. We have seen that there can be nothing outside of the all. Then, is the universe the all? No, this cannot be, because the universe seems to be made up of many, and is constantly changing, and in other ways, it does not measure up to the ideas that we are compelled to accept regarding the all, as stated in our last lesson. Some philosophers have answered this question by saying that the all created the universe from itself, that is, from the being and substance of the all. But this will not do, for the all cannot be subtracted from or divided, as we have seen. And then again, if this be so, would not each particle in the universe be aware of its being, the all? Just as you, student, may create a universe of your own in your mentality, so does the all create universes in its own mentality. But your universe is the mental creation of a finite mind, whereas that of the all is the creation of an infinite. The two are similar in kind, but infinitely different in degree. The all creates in its infinite mind countless universes which exist for eons of time, and yet, to the all, the creation, development, decline, and death of 1,000,000 universes is as the time of the twinkling of the eye. The infinite mind of the all is the womb of universes. Gender does not mean sex. Sex is merely a material manifestation of gender. Gender means relating to generation or creation. And whenever anything is generated or created on any plane, the principle of gender must be manifested, and this is true even in the creation of universes. Now do not jump to the conclusion that we are teaching that there is a male and female God or creator. That idea is merely a distortion of the ancient teachings on the subject. The true teaching is that the all, in itself, is above gender. It is above every other law, including those of time and space. It is the law, from which the law proceed, and it is not subject to them. But when the all manifests on the plane of generation or creation, then it acts according to the law and principle, for it is moving on a lower plane of being, and consequently it manifests the principle of gender in its masculine and feminine aspects on the mental plane, of course. It may help you to get to the proper idea if you will apply the law of correspondence to yourself in your own mind. You know that the part of you which you call I, in a sense, stands apart and witnesses the creation of mental images in your own mind. The part of your mind in which the mental generation is accomplished may be called the me, in distinction from the I, which stands apart and witnesses and examines the thoughts, ideas, and images of the me. As above, so below. Remember, the phenomena of one plane may be employed to solve the riddles of higher or lower planes. And death is not real, even in the relative sense. It is but birth to a new life, and you shall go on and on and on to higher and still higher planes of life, for eons upon eons of time. The universe is your home, and you shall explore its farthest reaches before the end of time. You are dwelling in the infinite mind of the All, and your possibilities and opportunities are infinite, both in time and space. And at the end of the grand cycle of eons, when the All shall draw back unto itself all of its creations, you will go gladly, for you will then be able to know the whole truth of being at one with the All. Such is the report of the illuminated, those who have advanced well along the path. And in the meantime, rest calm and serene. You are safe and protected by the infinite power of the Father-Mother mind. Within the Father-Mother mind, mortal children are at home. There is not one who is fatherless nor motherless in the universe. Chapter 6. The Divine Paradox. The half-wise, recognizing the comparative unreality of the universe, imagine that they may defy its laws. Such are vain and presumptuous fools, and they are broken against the rocks and torn asunder by the elements, by reason of their folly. The truly wise, knowing the nature of the universe, use law against laws, the higher against the lower, and by the art of alchemy, transmute that which is undesirable into that which is worthy, and thus triumph. Mastery consists not in abnormal dreams, visions, and fantastic imaginings or living, but in using the higher forces against the lower, escaping the pains of the lower planes by vibrating on the higher. Transmutation, not presumptuous denial, is the weapon of the master. And if man, owing to half-wisdom, acts and lives and thinks of the universe as merely a dream, akin to his own finite dreams, then indeed does it so become for him, and like a sleepwalker he stumbles ever around and around in a circle, making no progress and being forced into an awakening at last by his falling bruised and bleeding over the natural laws which he ignored. The first thought that comes to the thinking man after he realizes the truth that the universe is a mental creation of the All is that the universe and all that it contains is a mere illusion, an unreality, against which idea his instincts revolt. But this, like all other great truths, must be considered both from the absolute and the relative points of view. From the absolute point of view, of course, the universe is in the nature of an illusion, a dream, as compared to the All in itself. We recognize this even in our ordinary view, for we speak the world as a fleeting show that comes and goes, is born and dies. For the element of impermanence and change, fitness and unsubstantiality must ever be connected to the idea of the created universe when it is contrasted with the idea of the All. Anything that has a beginning and an ending must be, in a sense, unreal and untrue, and the universe comes under the rule in all schools of thought. This universe of mentality is very real indeed. It is the only one we can ever know, though we rise from plane to plane, higher and higher in it, to know it otherwise. But actual experience, we must be the All itself. It is true that the higher we rise in the scale, the nearer to the mind of the Father we reach. The more apparent becomes the illusory nature of finite things, but not until the All finally withdraws us into itself does the vision actually vanish. Though we rise from plane to plane, higher and higher in it, to know it otherwise, but actual experience, we must be the All itself. It is true that the higher we rise in the scale, the nearer to the mind of the Father we reach. the more apparent becomes the illusory nature of finite things. But not until the all finally withdraws us into itself does the vision actually vanish. So we need not dwell upon the feature of illusion. Rather, let us, recognizing the real nature of the universe, seek to understand its mental laws and endeavor to use them to the best effect in our upward progress through life, as we travel from plane to plane of being. So, do not feel insecure or afraid, for we are all held firmly in the infinite mind of the All. So, the student of Hermetics need not lay aside any of his cherished scientific views regarding the universe. All he is asked to do is to grasp the underlying principle of the All is mind, the universe is mental, held in the mind of the All. He will find that the other 6 of the 7 principles will fit into his scientific knowledge and will serve to bring out obscure points and to throw light in dark corners. The purpose of this lesson is to impress upon the minds of our students the fact that to all intents and purposes, the universe and its laws and its phenomena are just as real, so far as man is concerned, as they would be under the hypothesis of materialism or injurism. Under any hypothesis, the universe in its outer aspect is changing, ever-flowing, and transitory, and therefore devoid of substantiality and reality. But note the other pole of the truth. Under the same hypothesis, we are compelled to act and live as if the fleeting things were real and substantial, with this difference always between the various hypotheses, that under the old views mental power was ignored as a natural force, while under mentalism it becomes the greatest natural force. And this one difference revolutionizes life to those who understand the principles and its resulting laws and practices. Mastery consists not in abnormal dreams, visions, and fantastic imaginings or living, but in using the higher forces against the lower, escaping the pains of the lower planes by vibrating on the higher. Remember always, student, that transmutation, not presumptuous denial, is the weapon of the master. The above quotations are from the Kybalion and are worthy of being committed to memory by the student. We are all on the path, and the road leads upward ever, with frequent resting places. Read the message of the Kybalion, and follow the example of the wise, avoiding the mistake of the half-wise, who perish by reason of their folly. Chapter 7. The All in All. While all is in the All, it is equally true that the All is in all. To him who truly understands this truth hath come great knowledge. And this being so, let us seek the truth, the understanding of which means so much. We have given you the Hermetic teachings regarding the mental nature of the universe, the truth that the universe is mental, held in the mind of the All. As the Kybalion says in the passage quoted above, all is in the All. But note also the co-related statement that it is equally true that the All is in all. This apparently contradictory statement is reconciled under the law of paradox. It is, moreover, an exact Hermetic statement of the relations existing between the All and its mental universe. The Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the All is immanent in remaining within, inherent, abiding within its universe, and in every part, particle, unit, or combination within the universe. This statement is usually illustrated by the teachers by a reference to the principle of correspondence. The teacher instructs the student to form a mental image of something, a person, an idea, something having a mental form, the favorite example being that of the author or dramatist forming an idea of his characters, or a painter or sculptor forming an image of an ideal that he wishes to express by his art. In each case, the student will find that while the image has its existence and being solely within his own mind, yet he, the student, author, dramatist, painter, or sculptor, is, in a sense, immanent in, remaining within, or abiding within, the mental image also. In other words, The entire virtue, life, spirit of reality in the mental image is derived from the immanent mind of the thinker. Consider this for a moment until the idea is grasped. If I may add, it is like the artist who becomes part of his art, and he's really focusing into the idea of the art so that he's one with it. Shakespeare also existed within each of these characters, giving them their vitality, spirit, and action. Whose is the spirit of the characters that we know as Oliver Twist, Uriah Heep? Is it Dickens, or have each of these characters a personal spirit independent of their creator? Have they a spirit and reality of their own, or do they represent the spiritual and mental power of their creators? The law of paradox explains that both proportions are true, viewed from the proper viewpoints. Micawber is both Micawber and yet Dickens, and again, while Micawber may be said to be Dickens, yet Dickens is not identical with Micawber. Man, like Micawber may explain, the spirit of my creator is inherent within me, and yet I am not he. How different this is from the shocking half-truth, so voraciously announced by certain of the half-wise, who fill the air with their cries of I am God. Imagine poor Micawber of the sneaky Uriah Heep crying, I am Dickens, or some of the lowly clouds in one of Shakespeare's plays, eloquently announcing that I am Shakespeare. The all is in the earthworm, and yet the earthworm is far from being the all, and still the wonder remains. That though the earthworm exists merely as a lowly thing, created and having its being solely within the mind of the all, yet the all is immanent in the earthworm, and in the particles that go to make up the earthworm. Can there be any greater mystery than this, of all in the all, and the all in all? The difference between the two poles separates them, and yet it is merely a matter of degree. The same principle is in operation. The principle of correspondence manifests in each as above, so below, as below, so above, and in the degree that man realizes the existence of the indwelling spirit inanimate within his being, so will he rise to the spiritual scale of life. This is what spiritual development means, the recognition, realization, and manifestation of the spirit within us. Try to remember this last definition, that of spiritual development. It contains the truth of true religion. And upward and onward along this scale of life, everything is moving. All are on the path whose end is the all. All progress is a returning home. All is upward and onward, in spite of all seemingly contradictory appearances. Such is the message of the illuminated. This process is called the stage of involution, in which the all becomes involved or wrapped up in its creation. This process is believed by the Hermeticists to have a correspondence to the mental process of an artist, writer, or inventor who becomes so wrapped up in his mental creation as to almost forget his own existence, and who, for the time being, almost lives in his creation. Instead of wrapped, we use the word wrapped. Perhaps we will give a better idea of what is meant. And they spelled wrapped, R-A-P-T. This involuntary stage of creation is sometimes called the outpouring of the divine energy, just as the evolutionary state is called the indrawing. The extreme pole of the creative process is considered to be the furthest removed from the all, while the beginning of the evolutionary stage is regarded as the beginning of the return swing of the pendulum of rhythm, a coming home idea being held in all of the Hermetic teachings. The teachings are that during the outpouring, the vibrations become lower and lower until finally the urge ceases and the return swing begins. But there is this difference, that while in the outpouring, the creative forces manifest compactly and as a whole, yet from the beginning of the evolutionary or indrawing stage, there is manifested the law of individualization. The ancient Hermeticists used the word meditation in describing the process of the mental creation of the universe in the mind of the all, the word contemplation also being frequently employed. But the idea intended seems to be that of the employment of the divine attention. Attention is a word derived from the Latin root meaning to reach out, to stretch out, and so the act of attention is really a mental reaching out, extension of mental energy, so that the underlying idea is readily understood when we examine into the real meaning of attention. In short, the entire process of evolution, in all of its phases, begins and proceeds according to the established laws of indrawing. At the end of countless cycles of eons of time, the all withdraws its attention, its contemplation and meditation of the universe, for the great work is finished, and all is withdrawn into the all, from which it emerged. But mystery of mysteries, the spirit of each soul, is not annihilated, but is infinitely expanded. The created and the Creator are merged, such is the report of the illuminated. The above illustration of the meditation and subsequent awakening from meditation of the all is, of course, but an attempt of the teachers to describe the infinite process by a finite example, and yet, as below, so above. The difference is merely in degree, and just as the all arouses itself from the meditation upon the universe, so does man, in time, cease from manifesting upon the material plane and withdraws himself more and more into the indwelling spirit, which is indeed the divine ego. Others have sought to explain the mystery by assuming that the all found itself compelled to create by reason of its own internal nature, its creative instinct. This idea is in advance of the others, but its weak point lies in the idea of the all being compelled by anything, internal or external. If its internal nature, or creative instinct, compelled it to do anything, then the internal nature or creative instinct would be the absolute instead of the all. And so, accordingly, that part of the proposition falls. And yet, the all does create and manifest, and seems to find some kind of satisfaction in doing. And it is difficult to escape the conclusion that in some infinite degree it must have what would correspond to an inner nature or creative instinct in man, with correspondingly infinite desire and will. It could not act unless it willed to act, and it would not will to act unless it desired to act, and it would not desire to act unless it obtained some satisfaction thereby. Strictly speaking, there cannot be said to be any reason whatsoever for the all to act, for a reason implies a cause, and the all is above cause and effect, except when it wills to become a cause, in which time the principle is set into motion. The all is all reason in itself, all law in itself, all action in itself. It may be said truthfully that the all is its own reason, its own law, its own act, or still further, the all, its reason, its act, its law, are one, all being names for the one thing in the opinion of those who are giving you those present lessons. The answer is locked up in the inner self of the all, along with its secretive being. The law of correspondence, in our opinion, reaches only to that aspect of the all, which may be spoken of as the aspect of becoming. Back of what aspect is the aspect of being, in which all laws are lost in law, and principles merge into principle, and the all, principle, and being are identical, one and the same. Therefore, metaphysical speculation on this point is futile. We go into the matter here merely to show that we recognize the question, and also the absurdity, of the ordinary answers of metaphysics and theology. Chapter 8. Planes of Correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. 1. The great physical plane. 2. The great mental plane. 3. The great spiritual plane. You will kindly remember, however, that the three great planes are not actual divisions of the phenomena of the universe, but merely arbitrary terms used by the Hermeticists in order to aid in the thought and study of the various degrees and forms of universal activity and life. The atom of matter, the unit of force, the mind of man, and the being of the archangel are all but degrees in one scale, and all fundamentally the same, the difference between solely a matter of degree and rate of vibration. All are creations of the All, and have their existence solely within the infinite mind of the All. Chapter 9. Vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. The Hermetic teachings are that not only is everything in constant movement and vibration, but that the differences between the various manifestations of the universal power are due entirely to the varying rate and mode of vibrations. Not only this, but that even the All in itself manifests a constant vibration of such an infinite degree of intensity and rapid motion that it may be practically considered as at rest. Be an object cold or hot, both being but degrees of the same things, it manifests certain heat vibrations, and in that sense it is in motion and vibration. Then all particles of matter are in circular movement. The planets revolve around suns, and many of them turn on their axis. The suns move around greater central points, and these are believed to move around still greater, and so on. Science does not yet attempt to explain the nature of the phenomenon known as cohesion, which is the principle of molecular attraction, nor chemical affinity, which is the principle of atomic attraction, nor gravitation, the greatest mystery of the three, which is the principle of attraction by which every particle or mass of matter is bound to every other particle or mass. These three forms of energy are not as yet understood by science, yet the writers incline to the opinion that these two are manifestations of some form of vibratory energy, a fact which the Hermeticists have held and taught for ages past. The teachings are that the eternal substance is a connecting link between the forms of vibratory energy, known as matter, on the one hand, and energy or force on the other, and also that it manifests a degree of vibration in rate and mode entirely its own. Then, one after another, all the notes of the musical scale appear, rising higher and higher as the motion is increased. Finally, when the motions have reached a certain rate, the final note perceptible to human ears is reached, and the shrill, piercing shriek dies away. The silence follows. No sound is heard from the revolving object, the rate of motion being so high that the human ear cannot register the vibrations. Then comes the perception of rising degrees of heat. Then, after quite a time, the eye catches a glimpse of the object becoming a dull, dark, reddish color. As the rate increases, the red becomes brighter. Then, as the speed is increased, the red melts into an orange. Then, the orange melts into a yellow. Then follow successively the shades of green, blue, indigo, and finally violet, as the rate of speed increases. Then, the violet shades away, and all color disappears, the human eye not being able to register them. But there are invisible rays emanating from the revolving object. The rays that are used in photographing and other subtle rays of light then begin to manifest the particular rays known as X-rays. The Hermeticists teach that if the vibrations be continually increased, the object would mount up the successive states of manifestation, and would in turn manifest the various mental stages, and then on spiritward, until it would finally re-enter the All, which is the absolute spirit. The object, however, would have ceased to be an object long before the stage of ethereal substance was reached. But otherwise the illustration is correct, inasmuch as it shows the effect of constantly increased states and modes of vibration. It must be remembered in the above illustration that at the stages at which the object throws off vibrations of light, heat, etc., it is not actually resolved into those forms of energy, which are much higher in the scale. but simply that it reaches a degree of vibration in which those forms of energy are liberated, in a degree, from the confining influences of its molecules, atoms, and corpuscles, as the case may be. But the Hermetic teachings go much further than do those of modern science. They teach that all manifestation of thought, emotion, reason, will, or desire, or any mental state or condition, are accompanied by vibrations, a portion of which are thrown off and which tend to affect the minds of other persons by induction. This is the principle which produces the phenomena of telepathy, mental influence, and other forms of the action and power of the mind over mind, with which the general public is rapidly becoming acquainted. Every thought, emotion, or mental state has its corresponding rate and mode of vibration, and by an effort of the will of the person, or of other persons, these mental states may be reproduced, just as a musical tone may be reproduced by causing an instrument to vibrate at a certain rate, just as color may be reproduced in the same way, by a knowledge of the principle of vibration as applied to mental phenomena. One may polarize his mind at any degree he wishes, thus gaining a perfect control over his mental states, moods, etc. In the same way, he may affect the minds of others, producing the desired mental states in them. In short, he may be able to produce on the mental plane that which science produces on the physical plane, namely, vibrations at will. This power, of course, may be acquired only by the proper instruction, exercises, practice, etc. The science being that of mental transmutation, one of the branches of the Hermetic art. Chapter 10. Polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. Light and darkness are poles of the same thing, with many degrees between them. The musical scale is the same. Starting with C, you move upward until you reach another C, and so on. The differences between the two ends of the board being the same, with many degrees between the two extremes. The scale of color is the same higher and lower vibrations, being the only difference between high violet and low red. Large and small are relative, so are noise and quiet. Hard and soft follow the rule, likewise sharp and dull. Positive and negative are two poles of the same thing, with countless degrees between them. There are degrees of love and hate, and there is a middle point where like and dislike become so faint that it is difficult to distinguish between the two. Courage and fear come under the same rule. The pairs of opposites exist everywhere. Where you find one thing, you find its opposite, the two poles. And it is this fact that enables the Hermeticist to transmute one mental state into another, along the lines of polarization. Things belonging to different classes cannot be transmuted into each other, but things of the same class may be changed, that is, may have their polarity changed. Thus, love never becomes east or west, or red or violet, but it may and often does turn into hate, and likewise, hate may be transformed into love by changing its polarity. Courage may be transmuted into fear, and the reverse. Hard things may be rendered soft. Dull things become sharp. Hot things become cold, and so on. The transmutation always being between things of the same kind of different degrees. The change is not in the nature of the transmutation of one thing into another thing entirely different, but is merely a change of degree in the same things, a vastly important difference. For instance, borrowing an analogy from the physical plane, it's impossible to change heat into sharpness, loudness, highness, etc. But heat may be readily transmuted into cold, simply by lowering the vibrations. In the same way, hate and love are mutually transmutable. So are fear and courage, but fear cannot be transformed into love, nor can courage be transformed into hate. The mental states belong to innumerable classes, each class of which has its opposite poles, along which transmutation is possible. It is along this principle that the results of many of the mental treatments are obtained. For instance, a person is blue, melancholy, and full of fear. A mental scientist, bringing his own mind up to the desired vibration of his trained will, and thus obtaining the desired polarization in his own case, then produces a similar mental state in the other by induction. The result being that the vibrations are raised and the person polarizes towards the positive end of the scale, instead toward the negative, and his fear and other negative emotions are transmuted to courage and similar positive mental states. A little study will show you that these mental changes are nearly all along the line of polarization, the change being one of degree rather than of kind. He will see that these states are all matters of degree, and seeing thus, he will be able to raise or lower the vibration at will, to change his mental poles, and thus be master of his mental states, instead of being their servant and slave. And by his knowledge, he will be able to aid his fellows intelligently and by the appropriate methods change the polarity when the same is desirable. We advise all students to familiarize themselves with the principle of polarity for a correct understanding of the same will throw light on many difficult subjects. Chapter 11. Rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The principle of rhythm is closely connected with the principle of polarity, described in the preceding chapter. Rhythm manifests between the two poles established by the principle of polarity. This does not mean, however, that the pendulum of rhythm swings to the extreme poles, for this rarely happens. In fact, it is difficult to establish the extreme polar opposites in the majority of cases. But the swing is ever toward first one pole and then the other. There is always an action and reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking, manifested in all of the airs and phenomena of the universe: suns, worlds, men, animals, plants, minerals, forces, energy, mind, and matter. Yes, even spirit manifests this principle. The principle manifests in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life history of all things, and finally in the mental states of man. Beginning with the manifestations of spirit, of the all, it will be noticed that there is ever the outpouring and indrawing, the outbreathing and inbreathing of Brahm. And thus it is with all the things of the world. They are born, grow, and die, only to be reborn, and thus it is with all the things of shape and form. They swing from action to reaction, from birth to death, from activity to inactivity, and then back again. Thus it is with all living things. They are born, grow, and die, and then are reborn. So it is with all great movements, philosophies, creeds, fashions, governments, nations, and all else: rebirth, growth, maturity, decadence, death, and then new birth. The swing of the pendulum is ever in evidence. There is no such thing as absolute rest. The Hermetic masters long since discovered that while the principle of rhythm was invariable and ever in evidence in mental phenomena, still there were two planes of its manifestation, so far as mental phenomena are concerned. They discovered that there were two general planes of consciousness, the lower and the higher, the understanding of which enabled them to rise to the higher plane and thus escape the swing of the rhythmic pendulum, which manifested on the lower plane. In other words, the swing of the pendulum occurred on the unconscious plane, and the consciousness was not affected. This they call the law of neutralization. Its operations consist in the raising of the ego above the vibrations of unconscious plane of mental activity, so that the negative swing of the pendulum is not manifested in consciousness, and therefore they are not affected. It is akin to rising above a thing and letting it pass beneath you. The Hermetic master, or advanced student, polarizes himself at the desired pole, and by a process akin to refusing to participate in the backward swing, or, if you prefer, a denial of its influence over him, he stands firm in his polarized position, and allows the mental pendulum to swing back along the unconscious plane. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery accomplish this more or less unknowingly, and by refusing to allow their moods and negative mental states to affect them, they apply the law of neutralization. The master, however, carries this to a much higher degree of proficiency, and by the use of his will he attains a degree of poise and mental firmness, almost impossible of belief on the part of those who allow themselves to be swung backward and forward by the mental pendulum of moods and feelings. If you will stop and consider a moment, you will realize how much these swings of rhythm have affected you in your life, how a period of enthusiasm has been invariably followed by an opposite feeling and mood of depression. Likewise, your moods and periods of courage have been succeeded by equal moods of fear, and so it has ever been with the majority of persons. Tides of feeling have ever risen and fallen within them, but they have never suspected the cause or reason of the mental phenomena. One of the definitions or meanings of the word compensate is to counterbalance, which is the sense in which the Hermeticists use the term. It is the law of compensation, to which the Kybalion refers when it says, "The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates." The law of compensation is that the swing is in one direction, determines the swing in the opposite direction, or to the opposite pole. The one balances or counterbalances the other. These are temperatures which permit but low degrees of enjoyment. The Hermeticists teach that a man's mental states are subject to the same law. The man who enjoys keenly is subject to keen suffering, while he who feels but little pain is capable of feeling but little joy. There are temperaments which permit of but low degrees of enjoyment and equally low degrees of suffering, while there are others which permit the most intense enjoyment, but also the most intense suffering. The rule is that the capacity for pain and pleasure in each individual are balanced. The law of compensation is in full operation here. But the Hermeticists go still further in this matter. They teach that before one is able to enjoy a certain degree of pleasure, he must have swung as far, proportionately, toward the other pole of feeling. They hold, however, that the negative is precedent to the positive in this matter. That is to say, that in experiencing a certain degree of pleasure, it does not follow that he will have to pay up for it with a corresponding degree of pain. On the contrary, the pleasure is the rhythmic swing, according to the law of compensation, for a degree of pain previously experienced either in the present life or a previous incarnation. This throws a new light on the problem of pain. But the Hermeticists claim that the master or advanced student is able, to a great degree, to escape the swing toward pain by the process of neutralization before mentioned. By swinging on the higher plane of the ego, much of the experience that comes to those dwelling on the lower plane is avoided and escaped. The law of compensation plays an important part in the lives of men and women. It will be noticed that one generally pays the price of anything he possesses or lacks. If he has one thing, he lacks another. The balance is struck. No one can keep his penny and have a bit of the cake at the same time. Everything has its pleasant and unpleasant sides. Chapter 12. Causation. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to the law. Chance is but a name for the law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. Just as a man has 2 parents and 4 grandparents and 8 great-grandparents and 16 great-great-grandparents and so on until when, say, 40 generations are calculated. The numbers of ancestors run into many millions. So it is with the number of causes behind even the most trifling event or phenomena, such as the passage of a tiny speck of soot before your eye. It is not an easy matter to trace the bit of soot back to the early period of the world's history when it formed, a part of a massive tree trunk, which was afterward converted into coal and so on, until, as the speck of soot it is now, passes before your vision on its way to another adventure. And a mighty chain of events, causes and effects, brought it to its present condition, and the latter is but one of the chain of events which will go to produce other events hundreds of years from now. One of the series of events arising from the tiny bit of soot was the writing of these lines, which caused the typewriter to perform certain work, the proofreader to do likewise, and which will arouse certain thoughts in your mind and that of others, which in turn will affect others, and so on and so on and on and on, beyond the ability of man to think further, and all from the passage of a tiny bit of soot, all of which shows the relativity and association of things, and the further fact that there is no great, there is no small in the mind that causeth all. And the very act of writing on our part, and the act of reading on yours, will affect not only the respective lives of yours and ourselves, but will also have a direct or indirect effect upon many other people now living and who will live in the ages to come. Every thought we think, every act we perform, has its direct and indirect results which fit into the great chain of cause and effect. The ancient writers express the matter thus: the further the creation is from the center, the more it is bound. The nearer the center it reaches, the nearer free it is. The majority of people are more or less the slaves of heredity, environment, etc., and manifest very little freedom. They are swayed by the opinions, customs, and thoughts of the outside world, and also by their emotions, feelings, moods, etc. They manifest no mastery worthy of the name. They say, "Why, I certainly am free to act and do as I please. I do just what I want to do." But they fail to explain where arise the want to and as I please. What makes them want to do one thing in preference to another? What makes them please to do this or do that? Is there no because to their pleasing and wanting? The master can change these pleases and wants into others at the opposite end of the mental pole. He is able to will, instead of to will because some feeling, mood, emotion, or environment suggestion arouses a tendency or desire within him to do so. The majority of people are carried along like a falling stone, obedient to environment, outside influences, and internal moods, desires, etc. Not to speak of the desires and wills of others stronger than themselves, heredity, environment, and suggestion, carrying them along without resistance on their part, or the exercise of the will. Moved like pawns on the checkerboard of life, they play their part and are laid aside after the game is over. But the masters, knowing the rules of the game, rise above the plane of material life, and placing themselves in touch with the higher powers of their nature, dominate their own moods, characters, qualities, and polarity, as well as the environment surrounding them, and thus become movers in the game instead of pawns, causes instead of effects. The masters do not escape the causation of the higher planes, but fall in with the higher laws, and thus master circumstances on the lower plane. They thus form a conscious part of the law. Instead of being mere blind instruments, while they serve on the higher planes, they rule on the material plane. I'll repeat that. While they serve on the higher planes, they rule on the material plane. The Hermetic teachings are that man may use law to overcome laws, and that the higher will always prevail against the lower, until at last he has reached the stage in which he seeks refuge in the law itself, and laughs the phenomenal laws to scorn. Are you able to grasp the inner meaning of this? Chapter 13. Gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. The office of gender is solely that of creating, producing, generating, etc., and its manifestations are visible on every plane of phenomena. The formation of an atom is really due to the clustering of negative corpuscles around a positive one, the positive corpuscles seeming to exert a certain influence upon the negative corpuscles, causing the latter to assume certain combinations and thus create and generate an atom. So you see, we are justified in refusing to use the term negative in our consideration of the subject, and inserting upon substituting the word feminine for the old term. The facts of the case bear to us out in this, without taking the Hermetic teachings into consideration. And so we shall use the word feminine in place of negative in speaking of the pole of activity. The feminine particles vibrate rapidly under the influence of the masculine energy, and circle rapidly around the latter. The result is the birth of a new atom. The new atom is really composed of a union of the masculine and feminine electrons or corpuscles. But when the union is formed, the atom is a separate thing, having certain properties, but no longer manifesting the property of free electricity. The process of detachment or separation of the feminine electrons is called ionization. These electrons or corpuscles are the most active workers in nature's field. Arising from their unions or companions, manifest the variety phenomena of light: heat, electricity, magnetism, attraction, repulsion, chemical affinity, and the reverse, and similar phenomena. And all this arises from the operation of the principle of gender on the plane of energy. In some of the forms of life, the two principles are combined in one organism. For that matter, everything in the organic world manifests both genders. There is always the masculine precedent in the feminine form. It will be found that gender is a consistent operation and manifestation in the field of inorganic matter and in the field of energy or force. Electricity is now generally regarded as the something into which all forms of energy seem to melt or dissolve. The electrical theory of the universe is the latest scientific doctrine and is growing rapidly in popularity and general acceptance. And thus it follows that if we are able to discover in the phenomena of electricity, even at the very root and source of its manifestations, a clear and unmistakable evidence of the presence of gender in its activities, we are justified in asking you to believe that science, at last, has offered proofs of the existence in all universal phenomena of that great Hermetic principle, the principle of gender. It is not necessary to take up your time with the well-known phenomena of the attraction and repulsion of the atoms, chemical affinity, the loves and hates of the atom particles, the attraction or cohesion between the molecules of matter. These facts are too well known to need extended comment from us. But have you ever considered that all of these things are manifestations of the gender principle? Can you not see that the phenomena is on all fours with that of the corpuscles or electrons? And more than this, can you not see that the reasonableness of the Hermetic teachings, which assert that the very law of gravitation, that strange attraction by reason of which all particles and bodies of matter in the universe tend toward each other, is but another manifestation of the principle of gender, which operates in the direction of attracting the masculine to the feminine energies and vice versa? We cannot offer you scientific proof of this at this time, but examine the phenomena in the light of the Hermetic teachings on the subject, and see if you have not a better working hypothesis than any offered by the physical science. Submit all physical phenomena to the test, and you will discern the principle of gender, even in evidence. Chapter 14. Mental Gender. The great Thomas J. Hudson attained great popularity in 1893 by advancing his well-known theory of the objective and subjective minds, which he held existed in every individual. Other writers have attracted almost equal attention by the theories regarding the conscious and subconscious minds, the voluntary and involuntary minds, the active and passive minds, etc. The theories of these various writers differ from each other, but these remain the underlying principle of the duality of mind. The students are bidden to turn their attention inward upon the self dwelling within each. Each student is led to see that his consciousness gives him first a report of the existence of his self. The report is, I am. This at first seems to be the final words from the consciousness, but a little further examination discloses the fact that this I am may be separated or split into two distinct parts or aspects, which while working in unison and in conjunction, yet nevertheless may be separated in consciousness. But as man rises in the scale of consciousness, he is able to disentangle his me from his idea of body, and is able to think of his body as belonging to the mental part of him. But even then, he is very apt to identify the me entirely with the mental states, feelings, etc., which he feels to exist within him. He is very apt to consider these internal states as identical with himself, instead of their being simply things produced by some part of his mentality, and existing within him, of him, and in him, but still not himself. He finds there is not a consciousness of an ability to generate and actively create in the sense of the gradual process attendant upon mental operations, but rather a sense and consciousness of an ability to project an energy from the I to the me, a process of willing that the mental creation begin and proceed. The tendency of the feminine principle is always in direction of receiving impressions, while the tendency of the masculine principle is always in the direction of giving out or expressing. The feminine principle has much more varied field of operation than has the masculine principle. The feminine principle conducts the work of generating new thoughts, concepts, ideas, including the work of the imagination. The masculine principle contents itself with the work of the will in its varied phases, and yet, without the active aid of the will of the masculine polarity, the feminine principle is apt to rest content with generating mental images, which are the result of impressions received from outside instead of producing original mental creations. Persons who can give continued attention and thought to the subject actively employed upon the mental principles, the feminine in the work of the mental generation, and the masculine will in stimulating and energizing the creative portion of the mind. The majority of persons really employs the masculine principle but little, and are content to live according to the thoughts and ideas instilled into the me from the I of other minds. But it is not our purpose to dwell upon this phase of the subject, which may be studied from any good textbook upon psychology, with the key that we have given you regarding mental gender. In the phenomena of telepathy, it is seen how the vibratory energy of the masculine principle is projected toward the feminine principle of another person, and the latter takes the seed thought and allows it to develop into maturity. In the same way, suggestion and hypothesism operates. The masculine principle of the person giving the suggestions directs a stream of vibratory energy or willpower toward the feminine principle of the other person, and the latter accepting it makes it its own and acts and thinks accordingly. An idea thus lodged in the mind of another person grows and develops, and in time is regarded as the rightful mental offspring of the individual, whereas it is in reality like the cuckoo egg placed in the sparrow's nest, where it destroys the rightful offspring and makes itself a home. The normal method is for the masculine and feminine principles in a person's mind to coordinate and act harmoniously in conjunction with each other. But unfortunately, the masculine principle in the average person is too lazy to act. The display of willpower is too slight, and the consequence is that such persons are ruled almost entirely by the minds and wills of other persons, whom they allow to do their thinking and willing for them. How few original thoughts or original actions are performed by the average person? Are not the majority of persons mere shadows and echoes of others having stronger wills or minds than themselves? The trouble is that the average person dwells almost altogether in his me consciousness and does not realize that he has such a thing as an I. He is polarized in his feminine principle of mind, and the masculine principle, in which is lodged the will, is allowed to remain inactive and not employed. The manifestation of mental gender may be noticed all around us in everyday life. The magnetic persons are those who are able to use the masculine principle in the way of impressing their ideas upon others. The actor who makes people weep or cry as he wills is employing this principle. The student who has familiarized himself with the phenomena generally spoken of as psychic will have discovered the important part played in the said phenomena by that force which science has styled suggestion, by which term is meant the process or method whereby an idea is transferred to or impressed upon the mind of another, causing the second mind to act in accordance therewith. A correct understanding of suggestion is necessary in order to intelligently comprehend the varied physical phenomena which suggestion underlies. But still more is a knowledge of vibration and mental gender necessary for the student of suggestion. For the whole principle of suggestion depends upon the principle of mental gender and vibration. If you will think of the matter in the light of the Hermetic teachings, you will be able to see that the energizing of the feminine principle by the vibratory energy of the masculine principle is in accordance to the universal laws of nature, and that the natural world affords countless analogies whereby the principle may be understood. Chapter 15. Hermetic Axisms. The possession of knowledge, unless accompanied by a manifestation and expression in action, is like the hoarding of precious metals, a vain and foolish thing. Knowledge, like wealth, is intended for use. The law of use is universal, and he who violates it suffers by reason of his conflict with natural forces. The law of use is dwelt upon in the teachings, as you may see by reference in the above quotation from the Kybalion, which states it forcibly. Knowledge without use and expression is a vain thing, bringing no good to its possessor, or to the race. Beware of mental miserliness, and express into action that which you have learned. Study the axisms and aphorisms, but practice them also. We give below some of the more important Hermetic axisms from the Kybalion, with a few comments added to each. Make these your own, and practice and use them, for they are not really your own until you have used them. To change your mood or mental state, change your vibration. One may change his mental vibrations by an effort of will, in the direction of deliberately fixing the attention upon a more desirable state. Will directs the attention, and attention changes the vibration. Cultivate the art of attention by means of the will, and you have solved the secret of the mastery of moods and mental states. To destroy an undesirable rate of mental vibration, put into operation the principle of polarity, and concentrate upon the opposite pole to that which you desire to suppress. Kill out the undesirable by changing its polarity. This is one of the most important of the Hermetic formulas. It is based upon true scientific principles. We have shown you that a mental state and its opposite were merely the two poles of the one thing, and that by mental transmutation, the polarity might be reserved. The principle is known to modern psychologists, who apply it to the breaking up of undesirable habits. By binding their students, concentrate upon the opposite quality. If you are possessed by fear, do not waste time trying to kill out fear, but instead cultivate the quality of courage, and the fear will disappear. By changing your polarity, you may master your moods, change your mental states, remake your disposition, and build up character. Mind, as well as metals and elements, may be transmuted from state to state, degree to degree, condition to condition, pole to pole, vibration to vibration. The mastery of polarization is the mastery of the fundamental principles of mental transmutation, or mental alchemy. For unless one acquires the art of changing his own polarity, he will be unable to affect his environment. An understanding of this principle will enable one to change his own polarity, as well as that of others. He will but devote the time, care, study, and practice necessary to master the art. The principle is true, but the results obtained depend upon the persistent practice and patience of the student. Rhythm may be neutralized by an application of the art of polarization. As we have explained in previous chapters, the Hermeticists hold that the principle of rhythm manifests on the mental plane as well as the physical plane, and that the bewildering succession of modes, feelings, emotions, and other mental states are due to the backward and forward swing of the mental pendulum, which carries us from one extreme to feeling of the other. The Hermeticists also teach that the law of neutralization enables one to a great extent to overcome the operation of rhythm in consciousness. As we have explained, there is a higher plane of consciousness, as well as the ordinary lower plane, and the master, by raising mentally to the higher plane, causes a swing of mental pendulum to manifest on the lower plane, and he, dwelling on the higher plane, escapes the consciousness of the swinging backward. This is effected by polarizing on the higher self, and thus raising the mental vibrations of the ego above those of the ordinary plane of consciousness. It is akin to rising above a thing and allowing it to pass beneath you. The advanced Hermeticist polarizes himself at the positive pole of his being, the I am pole, rather than the pole of personality, and by refusing and denying the operation of rhythm, raises himself above its plane of consciousness, and standing firm in his statement of being, he allows the pendulum to swing back on the lower plane without changing his polarity. This is accomplished by all individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery, whether they understand the law or not. Such persons simply refuse to allow themselves to be swung back by the pendulum of mood and emotion. By steadfastly affirming the superiority, they remain polarized on the positive pole. Remember always, however, that you do not really destroy the principle of rhythm. For that, it is indestructible. You simply overcome one law by counterbalancing it with another, and thus maintain an equilibrium. The laws of balance and counterbalance are in operation on the mental as well as on the physical planes, and an understanding of these laws enables one to seem to overthrow laws, whereas he is merely exerting a counterbalance. Nothing escapes the principle of cause and effect, but there are many planes of causation, and one may use the law of the higher to overcome the laws of the lower. By rising above the plane of ordinary causes, they become themselves in a degree causes instead of being merely caused. By being able to master their own moods and feelings, and by being able to neutralize rhythm, as we have already explained, they are able to escape a great part of the operations of cause and effect on the ordinary plane. By rising above these influencing causes, the advanced Hermeticist seeks a higher plane of mental action, and by dominating their moods, emotions, impulses, and feelings, they create for themselves new characters, qualities, and powers, by which they overcome their ordinary environment, and thus become practically players instead of mere pawns. The wise ones serve on the higher plane, but rule on the lower. They obey the laws coming from above them, but on their own plane, and those below them they rule and give orders, and yet, in so doing, they form a part of the principle, instead of opposing it. The wise man falls in with the law, and by understanding its movements, he operates it, instead of being its blind slave. Just as does the skilled swimmer turn his way and that way, going and coming as he will, instead of being as the log, which is carried here and there, so is the wise man as compared to the ordinary man, and yet both swimmer and log, wise man and fool, are subject to the law. He who understands this is well on the way, on the road to mastery. In conclusion, let us again call your attention to the Hermetic axiom. True Hermetic transmutation is a mental art. If the universe is mental, then mind must be the highest power affecting its phenomena. If this be understood, then all the so-called miracles and wonder workings are seen plainly for what they are. The all is mind, the universe is mental. Again, these have been key quotes from the book The Kybalion. I have included all of the quotes of the Kybalion in the book, as well as some of the explanations that the initiates have given about each of the principles. I have included all 7 of the principles in the book. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Check out the link in the description for more fun things to explore here on this channel. I'm Matilda, and thanks again for listening. Goodbye.